The Elements of Harmony and Savior of Worlds by RK Striker JK5. Chapter 32. Spanish Steel stood on the edge of the bridge of Magnus, the equestrian air fleet's flagship, as it sailed through the air. A half-dozen smaller airships flew alongside her flanks, while squadrons of Pegasi flew in formation, some pushing along dark storm clouds that crackled with lightning. They slowly approached the Everfree. Other units from Manhattan, Baltimore, Napalm, and other cities were advancing on different vectors. Spanish Steel looked at the helm's pony. "Reduce speed," he said, before turning and trying to a small group of armored Pegasi standing near the battery. "Your saddlebags contain instructions for the unit commanders coming in from other cities. It is vital that you get to them as quickly as possible. Dismissed!" The balcony window slid open, and the Pegasi all marched out, spreading their wings and taking off. A half-dozen soldiers already out in the air broke from their sectors and surrounded each courier in a loose escort formation. The smaller ones had swivel mounts on their backs, with double-barreled rifles mounted on them, belt-fed by saddlebags and controlled by a metal pole connecting the barrels to the back of their armored necks. The larger ones had 30-caliber machine guns hanging out their flanks, also belt-fed from the saddlebags. Spanish Steel watched them for a moment, muttering prayers for them under his breath. He then marched down to several ponies standing next to the rather large spotlights with centers over them. "Signal the other airships to hold position at the edge of the Everfree," he ordered. "We need to contain the shadow bolts and stop them cold!" The helm's pony looked over his shoulder at Spanish Steel as he approached. "What about the Awesomenesss, sir?" Spanish Steel stared out the panoramic viewport of the Star Bears as he stood guard at the castle of the Two Sisters. "At the moment, not a darn thing. Princess Luna reported that a request for aid was sent to the Dragon Clans, but until they showed up, nothing short of the Diox going all out would stop them." The helm's pony thought for a moment. "And they'll need all their strength to deal with T-Rex?" she thought out loud. Spanish Steel nodded. "Exactly." Near the aft of the bridge, a half-dozen soldiers sat, 3 in a row, each sat in front of a desk. The desk stacked with radio equipment and wires sprouting like vines. One of them adjusted a headset strapped to his head and furiously scrawled down notes. "General!" he said. "Lead squadrons report the sound bolts are advancing for the Everfree." Another spoke up. "And they're also reporting storm clouds being moved into position, as well as sisters." Spanish Steel's head whipped around to the radios. "Send word to all Pegasi squadrons to move in and stop them, but heard sick, keep their own weaponized weather away from the Everfree. Spotlight operators, signal to the other airships to go full battle stations and fire at will. As for the rest of us, charge out the lightning cannons and be ready to shield spells for point defense." He marched to the viewport and looked down at it. Even a small puff of explosives began to blossom in the air. Formations of Pegasi and other flight-capable species swooped in and soared, machine guns and rifles firing at the shadow bolts, who, in turn, charged in, heedless of the hail of bullets. Both sides pushed in dark, rumbling clouds that shot out bolts of lightning when kicked, electrocuting their foes, their charged, smoking bodies pummeling through the sky, crashing into the canopy or the ground below. Why am I imagining that the Magus looks, strangely enough, like the helicarrier? The shadow bolts pressed on, ignoring any wounds that weren't instantly lethal or gasping too close to 4-leg distance with the defenders of Equestria. They bit, kicked, tackled, and hit with all their might, using brute force and sheer numbers to their advantage. The sun reached its zenith, shining down on a large empty field as morning turned to afternoon. The stillness was shattered by a large hemisphere of light appeared. It brightened for a few seconds, then quickly faded and disappeared. 8 unicorns in blue uniforms stood in a circle, their horns still glowing and slightly smoking from the long-distance teleportation. Several dozen ponies, donkeys, stonebacks, and zebras stood in the middle of the group, along with several pieces of artillery, ammunition, and other pieces of equipment. The unicorns looked around, performing a quick visual inspection of everyone there. Satisfied, their horns glowed and shot out beams of energy. The beams linked the horns together, and the unicorns disappeared, leaving behind the others. Within seconds of their arrival, the ends of the Everfree parted. Shadow bolts in the forms of earth ponies and unicorns trotted out, snarling and baring fangs. The unicorns lowered their heads, and their horns charged up, while the earth ponies pawed at the ground, hooves starting to glow. The battalion commander, a unicorn mare named Russell Reddy, began shouting orders. "Machine gunners! Cover fire while we get the artillery ready! On the quadruple, everyone!" 6 earth ponies galloped forward. 3 of them had a multi-barreled machine gun hanging off like a swivel arm off their right flank. It was attached to a steel sheath over their torso, with belts of ammunition feeding from the saddlebags. Like its pegasi in the air, a control rod led from the tips of the barrels to a trigger snaffle in their mouths. The three trailing toward the wagons with extra saddlebags for ammunition. The gunners slowed down and stopped, spreading out their hooves and leaning forward. The sun glinted off their eye protection as they bit down hard on the triggers, sending out controlled bursts of lead into shadow bolts. Roughly a dozen of the shadow bolts were cut down, dropping down where they stood. Several of their unicorns lowered their heads and began firing blasts of air while others formed shields, deflecting the incoming fire. They charged forward, covering their earth pony counterparts as they followed their wake. The gunner concentrated their fire on the unicorns, sending lead bouncing off their magical shields. Several shattered. The shadow bolts behind cut it down. Several more, however, ducked and weaved, using their sheer numbers to their advantage. The air shadow bolts reared back, kicking the air before plunging their glowing hooves through the ground. Large vines suddenly sprouted around the machine gunners, entangling and trapping them. They let out cries of surprise, ceasing their firing to avoid any accidental injuries of their compatriots. The shadow bolts began their advance once more, some of the unicorns now firing blasts of air from their horns. Ruth and Eddie snorted. She looked at the gunnery crews as the forward observer shouted out range data to the gunnery crews. She telekinetically slung up a megaphone to her muzzle. "Gunnery crews! Ready canister shots for those shadow bolts! I want them brought down! Stillbacks, get in and rescue the machine gunners! I want cover fire for them! Artillery, ready for my command for fire!" A half dozen stonebacks, large reptilian beings with armored backside, three-clawed paws and rather sharp teeth, ambled forward. They leaned forward, curling up into armored balls, and began rolling along the grass to the plants that still held the gunners. Shadow bolts fired blasts of magic at them, but they either missed or bounced off harmlessly off the stonebacks' backsides. They unrolled at the plants and began tearing at them with sharpened claws and teeth. More and more shadow bolts poured from Everfree, galloping across the field. A dozen unicorns advanced, spears held in telekinetic grip. They spun it around, and the crystalline heads glowed, firing off blasts of magic at the shadow bolts and giving the stonebacks time needed to free the machine gunners. Within minutes, the vines were shredded and the earth ponies freed. Ruff and Ray waited for them to scramble back to their own lines before barking into her megaphone once more. "Artillery crews! Fire at will!" That's not nice. Don't shoot at Will. I like Will. He's a good character. Oh, you mean that. The cannons roared, cutting down great swaths of shadow bolts like a scythe through wheat. They dropped dead, the canister shot tearing through their shields and the ponies themselves. Almost as quickly as the front flanks were cut down, though, more shadow bolts emerged from the shadows of Everfree. Their earth ponies dug their hooves into the ground, and more vines sprouted from the ground between them and the artillery, acting as cover for them. Ruff and Ray nickered. She cantered over to a zero, hunched over the radio. Send word to Fort Mainstay that we need reinforcements. Several bullets of magic impacted near the pair, crating the ground. It's resupply! The zebra nodded. She held up a microphone to her muzzle and relayed the orders. Ruff and Reddy, meanwhile, looked over the battlefield as the shadow bolts began making headway to their positions. She floated a spear off her back and aimed it at the shadow bolts, firing several bolts of magic at them. The shadow bolts' fire, though scattershot, began finding their marks. Bolts of magic splattered against the artillery's own armor, causing the crew to duck, delaying them in reloading their weapons, and occasionally hitting them directly and killing them. Unicorns threw up their own shields against the shadow bolts, protecting them and their compatriots. A few minutes passed before several teleportation domes sprang up around the artillery, fading and leaving behind soldiers and ammunition carts. Even as the carts were wheeled to the cannons, two giant domes formed on either side of the position. They slowly faded, leaving behind a half-dozen armored vehicles on their left flank and 200 soldiers of various species on their right. The shadow bolts skidded to the halt, some sliding on the grass and ending up on their haunches. They stared at the new arrivals, some tilting their heads in confusion or close proximity of curiosity before leaping to their hooves once more and resuming their attacks. The vehicles started moving forward on wraparound kilopillar tracks that overshadowed the main chassis. They were Mark 29 tanks, looking as if they were emergency from a newsreel of Earth's First World War. Each one was a massive beast, with two 75mm cannons on each side of the chassis and sponsoons, and a single 50-caliber machine gun perched on top of it. The cannons slowly moved about, tracking the massive groups of shadow bolts before firing high-explosive shells into the ranks. The infantry, meanwhile, formed up into groups around the tanks, crystal-tipped spears or flank-mounted firearms firing into shadow bolts. One of the tanks slowed to a halt near Rough and Ready. A green-coated unicorn mare sat at the guardian's position, straightening up, saluting. "Colonel!" she announced. "Sergeant Blasterford from Fort Bullrock." She smiled slightly. "We're sorry we're not from Mainstay, but we got your call for help and we're ready to go." Rough and Ready returned to salute and smiled. "No apologies necessary, Sergeant. Thanks." She went to the battlefield as the tanks and infantry swept the shadow bolts back into the Everfree. She swung her megaphone around. "All crews, prepare cover fire!" she shouted. Blasterford went ahead to the battle. "If you excuse me, Colonel," she said. "Private Day, full throttle!" The tank lurched forward, whipping Blasterford back and forth a bit. "What's the clutch?" she shouted, placing the foreleg on her helmet to keep it flying off. Cadence followed Fancy Pants as he led her up a winding staircase to the tallest tower in Canterlot Palace. It was an old observation tower, unused for hundreds of years and barely maintained. Cadence had to watch her step on more than one of the stairs, using her magic to brace a rotten board or her wings to float over it. Fancy Pants, though, paid no mind, trading up with nary a care in the world. They walked through the door out into the afternoon sun. Cadence closed her eyes and felt a slight breeze stir in her mane. "It feels nice up here," she said. Fancy Pants looked out across the horizon at the Ursa Majors towering in the sky and the aerial bow over Everfree. His monocle danced in the air. "I'm afraid, Princess, the niceness is only up here." Cadence's eyes snapped open. She walked over to the edge of the roof, eyes narrowing. "I know, Chancellor," she said. She spread her wings out and her horn glowed. Pink-colored magic flowed from it, stretching out. Cadence's senses followed suit as he sought out every bit of love, of affection in Canterlot, drawing strength from it and adding it to the shields. The pink bubble flowed down from the tower, covering Canterlot in a pink shield from the tops of the towers down to the top of the waterfall cascading down. Various citizens peeked out from their homes or shelters, seeing the shield. Some of them let out sighs of relief, while others cheered. It fed into Cadence, letting her strengthen the shield once more. Fancy Pants observed her and smiled. "Well, it's good to see shiny armor left us in good holes with you." He looked back over the roof's edge, eyes stretching out and finally focusing on an indistinct blob on the outside of the shield. Standing opposite the main entrance at the other side of the moat. "Then some Celtic blue blood is equally up to the task." Blue Blood looked around, eyes taking as much as they could. He stood out Cadence's seal with close to 100 members of the Royal Guard. The rest were either inside Canterlot itself or with shining armor. He turned to face everyone. "I want all Pegasi to break into flights of 4 and spread out," he ordered, stabbing a hoof into the sky. "Check every 5 minutes on Channel 1 of the wireless. Do not split up, and do not investigate anything without direct orders. I do not want anyone checking out something unusual and then being ambushed by several hundred sailboats. Understood?" The Pegasi there saluted. "Yes, sir!" they barked out. They then spread their wings and flew up, spreading out around Canterlot. Blue Blood glanced up to them before looking up the rain of guards. "All right, from what Auntie Luna told me about these ruffians, they're not one for subtlety or sneak attacks. If they come to Canterlot, it will most likely be a full frontal assault from the direction of Ponyville and the Everfree. Our mission, if they do, is to stop them. Understood?" The ponies straightened to attention. "Understood, sir!" Blue Blood eyed them. He pointed to Canterlot behind them. "That is my ancestral home. I can trace my lineage all the way back to the original founders, mere weeks before King Invincible I founded the ancient kingdom of Ponyland. And all that time, through Griffin invasions, T-Rex killing Majesty, dissolution of Ponyland, Discord, and Nightmare Moon, the city has never fallen. And upon my horn, it will not fall to T-Rex on this day. You are Royal Guard, reborn and ready to do your duty in defense of this city and of Equestria. Stand proud and tall, ponies!" He canted around and floated his spear up to the air. "Are you with me?" Those behind him thrust their own weapons in the air. "Yes, sir!" they all shouted. Blue Blood nodded. "Excellent. Fine out, then. Report in every 5 minutes over to Channel 2 on wireless." He glanced down over his shining arm or shoulder. "Move out!" I would just like to say, this is probably one of the few times I'm ever going to do something completely badass, says my Blue Blood voice. Again, thank you, RK, for something unique and something totally awesome. Private Tom Furley trotted up to his side. "Thank you for the rising feet, sir, and for the opportunity to prove ourselves," she said. Blue Blood turned his head, glancing at her through the visor on his helmet. Ears pricked at the faintest rumbling of a steam engine. You're welcome, Private. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I did just have a hoovercut, after all, he said, winking. Telephone only paused for a moment. Yes, sir. I see, sir. I'll go take my position now. And with that, she trotted off. Blue Blood rolled his eyes and whinnied, but turned to Radiant Spear. Just what did I get myself into again? Oh, Auntie, you better remember this come my birthday. The Friendship Express chugged along at full speed. The steam engine pushed it to its limits as it sped to Ponyville. 24 Pegasi flew above and along its escorts, all 6 occupants occupied by the Royal Guard as it traveled to Ponyville. Shining Armor, Flash Sentry, and a half-dozen of his most trusted Royal Guard stood in a training car. A map of the Canterlot province unfurled across a long banquet table. He shuffled around the small icons, representing units of equestrian armed forces, the Royal Guard, the T-Rex forces, and the EUP. Alright, we'll be arriving at the train station in about 20 minutes, but it's on the other side of Ponyville from the Everfree forest. He looked up at everyone there. I want the entire town swept through, street by street, and house by house if we have to. Flash Sentry looked over Ponyville. Well, this is it, Shining. This is what all the training and hard work over the past 2 years has been building up to. But are we ready? The captain of the guard floated a daisy sandwich over and bit into it, chewing and swallowing in order to collect his thoughts. No choice, he finally said. He looked up at his second command and chuckled. Still glad you decided to help me out with this? Flash Sentry waved him off a wing. No way! Besides, you needed someone to do all the hard work while you waved to the crowds during parades and shined your medals. Shining Armor glared down the leaf of his horn, but eyes held no as. It's not too late for you to transfer to the air fleet. Hey, maybe you'd like to go up north to where the Crystal Empire was, he said, smirking. You need me to watch your haunts a bit more than that, Flash Sentry retorted, his expression turned grin. So, you think this is it? The final prophecy of the moon chick? She is the Magne, after all. There was a pause. Shining Armor shouted his helplessness and let out a whinny. She's mortal, Flash. She's not some semi-defined being like in the old tales. But there's also something about her, too. I can't quite put it into words, though. But if there's anyone who could send T-Rex back to Tartarus once and for all, that's not an alicorn or an elemental harmony, it's her. He looked at his friend. She will lead old and new against the first, who is now the last. The 64,000-bit question is, will we win? We will, Flash Sentry said. I've got faith in not just her, but everyone else in Equestria. He stomped a hoof on the wooden floor, sending out with a resounding thud for emphasis. We're her friends, and she's our friend, and nothing beats friends when they work together. Ladies and gentlemen, that may be the most bad-tush thing I've ever said as Flash Sentry on this show. Chapter 33. T-Rex's chants grew louder. His gesticulations grew grander and grander. The blackness surrounding the throne grew darker and inkier, and Megan's knife bit deeper and deeper into the mortar around the stone block that encircled her feet. The block itself shifted more and more, held in more by the others surrounding it than the mortar itself. Satisfied with the work, she slid the knife back into its sheath and slowly stood up. When Megan finally reached the vertical position, she double-checked her peacemakers, making sure each one was fully loaded. She also patted down her bandoliers of extra ammo and checked the 36 cartridges. Not much ammo. Remember to aim, Megan. Don't waste shots. A few deep breaths were taken, and nerves steady as much as possible. Like a panic layer, like a hyperventilate layer, after the battle, and after all this. Right now, everyone needs you, and you need to keep yourself together. With that, Megan drew herself off to her full height. It's quick before quickly bending at her knees and focused all her weight on her feet. The stone block lurched, sliding down with every vertical shove. The stone screeched, whining with every slide. T-Rex's head shot around, his blood-red eyes wide in surprise as he sank down. He reached out with a telekinetic hand, but he quickly slid down to the floor below. He galloped forward, stopping above the small hole above the floor. He reached out, sensing 9 shadow floats in the floor below him.
Wait, weren't there 10 on guard below? Bah, no matter. Shadow boats. Retriever.
he commanded of his minions. A sudden crack from below startled him slightly, and suddenly he could only sense 8 shadow bolts now. The room was dusty, and the few pieces of furniture inside mostly broken down and covered with a thick layer of dust. 10 shadow bolts, 5 earth ponies and 5 unicorns milled about, their nostrils twisting slightly. Beyond that, though, they did little more than breathe in and out. Their entire will was that of T-Rex. Their entire reasoning for being was his commands. A small shower of dust sprinkled down below onto the table, gaining the attention of one of them. It trotted over to the edge of the table and looked up, cocked its head to the side as a block of stone slid down from the ceiling, dropping down. It stopped for a moment before quickly dislodging itself, plummeting straight down. It, along with Megan, hit the edge of the table opposite the shadow bolt, sending the top lurching up and hitting it right below the chin. The shadow bolt's head snapped back with a sickening crunch. Its neck broken. The body dropped and dead before it hit the stone floor. The stone block shattered, freeing Megan's feet. She fell back, hitting the table even as it flew up with the impact. She rolled it to her right and off the swinging slab, eyes crossing. Megan grunted as she pushed herself forward onto one knee, her right hand sliding into the pistol from its holster and pulling back on the hammer with one smooth motion. She looked around at the 4 earth ponies and 5 unicorns staring at her from around the room. 2 earth ponies stood behind a stone column, a window behind them. 2 unicorns were opposite her, standing in the wider expanse of the room. The other 5 stood hunched up in front of the door. Megan sucked in a breath. Okay. I don't want to hurt any of you. T-Rex is using you! She suddenly ducked as one of the unicorns near the door shot a bolt of magic at her. The bolt shot past her head, striking a wall and blowing out chunks of rock. Megan glanced behind her at the smoking hole in the wall, eyes wide. Her head whipped back as she raised her pistol, aiming it at the unicorn. Squared her shoulders, held her breath, and squeezed it tighter. Unicorn's head shot back slightly. His eyes rolled to the back of his head and slumped down, a small hole between the eyes. The other shadow bolts paid its demise no mind, though their yellow eyes focused on their prey. Megan suddenly turned to the earth ponies near the window. She fired, but one managed to duck behind a column. She bit back a swear, aiming for the other shadow bolt and firing a pair of shots at it. One missed, but the other hit the left shoulder, sending it stumbling down to the one foreleg and whinnying in pain. Even as it fell, Megan suddenly hopped up onto the table, sliding across it, landing in a crouch, pulling out the other pistol with her left hand. She swung it to her left, firing a pair of shots at the group near the door, wounding one of them and sending the other scattering. With slow, deliberate motions, she brought the other pistol up, aimed at the first unicorn, and fired, catching the still reacting shadow bolt right in the head. She swung her arm around to the other, but fired off a quick bolt of magic at her. Megan fell back, barely dodging the attack, her next shot going into the ceiling. She ducked walled to the table, whipping her right arm about and throwing open the pistol cylinder. She fired 2 more shots from the still loaded weapon at the shadow bolts near the door, managing to finish off the one she had wounded beforehand. She rolled over the half-collapsed table, holstering one pistol before sliding the cartridge out of her bandolier and quickly reloading. The table suddenly glowed a sickly red and floated up, exposing Megan. The 2 earth ponies still near the door advanced upon her position, snarling and drooling. Megan gasped and looked toward the window, spying the low unicorn standing there as it levitated her cover away. She quickly looked back at the earth ponies opposite and raised her loaded pistol at them. She squinted slightly as she aimed and fired, striking one dead center in the chest with 2 bullets and shooting the other in the knee. It collapsed, squealing in pain. Megan looked around, spied a chunk of stone, grabbed it, and scrambled to her feet. She tossed it at the unicorn, nailing it in the forehead and horn. It cried out in pain, dropping the table and stumbling back into the wall. Blood poured from the wound. Megan, meanwhile, ran down the table, ran right up to it, and the injured earth pony standing by it. She finished off the unicorn with a single shot, but the earth pony charged at her, knocking her pistol away and her down to the floor, rolling a few times before stopping. The shadow bolt glared at her, eyes glowing yellow in the darkness. Megan tried to sit up, but a sharp pain moved through her back and shoulder blades. She bit her lip as she staked her left arm forward, grabbing the hilt of her knife and pulling it out of the sheath of her boot. She lunged her entire body forward, adrenaline and anxiety canceling out some of the pain, but not all of it. She cried out, equal parts agony and anger, as she stabbed at the pony, cutting into the chin and neck. Blood spurted from the wounds, gurgling and splattering all over Megan and the floor. The shadow bolt held up a hoof to his neck as he toppled over, trying in vain to staunch the flow. A small pool formed under it as it convulsing stopped, eventually coming to a full stop as the honey's eyes rolled in the back of his head. The two shadow bolts, still alive, limped in her direction, their injured legs unable to support their weight. Megan looked down, gripping her knife so hard her knuckles turned white. "Please, just stay down," she said. "Just lay down and let me go, all right?" T-Rex's voice suddenly echoed from above.
Shadowboats, do not rest until she is back here. This I command.
The two staggered to a three-legged gait, keeping off their injured limbs. They whinnied in pain, but continued to advance upon their target. Megan slowly stood up, pulled out her remaining pistol, and loaded it with 2 shots. She walked over to the one near the window, raising her arm and ending its misery. She rubbed her eyes at the sudden, unexpected moisture before walking to the pony near the door. Within seconds, the only sound left in the room was Megan's breathing. It was close to a minute before Megan walked back to her discarded pistol, knelt down and picked it up. She opened the cylinder and reloaded it, keeping her eyes fixed on the weapons in hands. T-Rex's voice boomed out once more.
You will not escape this time, Megan. I shall recapture you and take you for myself.
Megan finished reloading, checked her weapons, and holstered it. She then pulled out her other peacemaker and repeated the process. "It's a good thing Dane is not here, T-Rex," she remarked, finishing up and turning for the door. "That kind of comet wouldn't go past him without some sort of rainy window." She stopped at the hole in the ceiling and looked up. "I know. You ain't winning here, T-Rex. No matter what your grand plans or power or whatever, you will be stopped."
By who? You. You do not have the rainbow of light this time, girl.
"Then come on down and get me, you bastard!" Megan suddenly shouted, throwing her arms to the side. "I'm right here! Are you too afraid of a human to get your hands dirtier than the already are?" She pounded on her chest with a fist. "Come on down, if you got the guts to!" There was a silence from above. Megan leaned to her right as she stared up at the hole. She walked around, keeping her eyes on it. "Hello? T-Rex? Are you up there? Come on down, I said. Human with only 2 pistols and a knife against an undead centaur warlock, that's not the best odds." She looked back down and scratched her head. "There's gotta be something else here. Something else I'm missing." Her eyes suddenly widened as she thought back to something T-Rex said before.
I need a body to regain all my powers and leave my current situation.
"You're not coming after me because you don't want to, but because you can't come after me," she exclaimed, snapping her fingers. "The elements of harmony did something to you when they freed Luna from you, didn't they? Now you're trapped up there in that room." The ceiling shook, sending out bits of debris.
I am T-Rex, Lord of Darkness. I shall not be caged here, and you shall be the vessel of my release, Megan. Even now, more shadowboats are coming to capture you."
Megan tossed a saluted skyward. "Thanks for all the info, T-Rex. I'll be sure to put it to good use." She held her pistol up at the right position, running for the door and leaning to the floor below. T-Rex stomped over to a window, his entire being twisted by rage bubbling up over the surface. He raised a hand clenched to his fist as he focused on one of the beasts under his command.
I shall start the destruction a bit early. Go forth, Ursa Major and shadowboats. Wipe Canterlot off the face of Mount Ecolopolis.
One of the 6 Ursa Majors standing guard around the ancient castle shifted forward, turning to face the capital of Equestria. It leaned forward, dropping onto all fours and ambling along. Shadow bolts flew along with it and sped along the path of destruction to their new target. Trees in the path were torn down like toothpicks, not even slowing it down. Pegasi and airships were scattered ahead of it, flying out in a wave of mad dashes and drives. The Ursa continued along, not even noticing them as it focused on its target, the capital of Equestria. Luna looked up to the sun as it continued its flight across the sky. "I don't suppose there's any way you can slow it down?" she asked her sister. Celestia shook her head. I preset the course so I wouldn't have to worry about it. Sorry, Luna. She looked around the small clearing near the Rainbow Bridge. Danny, Molly, and Minerva had departed for Ponyville, while Mike stood by her, shifting from foot to foot. The princess ponies and bushwoolies formed a line near the Everfree, Tiffany in the air. Finally, Twilight, Rarity, and Pinkie Pie stood near the mouth of the path that led to Ponyville, waiting for their friends. Pinkie and Rarity wore their necklaces, while a crown adored Twilight's head. The sound of hoofs stomping into a well-worn path heralded Applejack's arrival. She charged to the clearing, slowing to a halt. "I'm here!" she cried, panting out slightly. "Land sakes, I'll be needing a nice little nap after today." She trotted over to Mike. "Mike, your kids are all safe and sound in that schoolhouse with the other foals." Mike dropped to one knee and wrapped his armored arms around Applejack, squeezing her head and neck. "Oh, thank you," he choked out. Applejack squirmed, her face turning blue. "Oh, yeah! Wag him! Oh, yeah!" Mike threw his arms in the air. "Sorry! Sorry!" he said, straightening back up. "But seriously, thank you, Applejack." Celestia's horn glowed, and Applejack's element of honesty floated over to her and around her neck. She looked to the sky. "Now, hopefully Rainbow Dash will." Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy suddenly dropped into the clearing, crashing into the dirt and rolling for a few feet before stopping. "Speak of discord." The two disentangled themselves from each other. Rainbow Dash leapt to her hooves and looked around, arching her back and flaring her wings out. "Okay, where's that son of a diamond dog?" She hopped through the air and punched the air with her forelegs. Fluttershy, meanwhile, curled up into a silvering ball. "Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!" she repeated, legs tucked in and wings wrapped around her head. Twilight, Rarity, Pinkie, and Applejack all gathered around the pair. "Are you two all right?" Rarity asked, bending down and examining Fluttershy's sinking form. "Please, darling, we need you." Fluttershy unfolded her wings and peeked a muzzle out. "Go away, I'm scared." She then covered her head once more. Rarity smoothed her mane down, then placed the hoof of one of Fluttershy's wing. "Yes, we know. We're all scared, Fluttershy. We're all feeling the same thing." She slowly raised her head and glared at Dash. "Right?" Dash opened her mouth, but hesitated as Twilight, Applejack, and Pinkie joined Rarity in the glare. Right." Rarity looked back at Fluttershy. "We're all in this together, Fluttershy. We'll be there for you. Will you be there for us? For Megan?" Applejack spoke up. "We really do need you, Sugar Cube. Come on. We know y'all can do it." Fluttershy's wings unfolded from her head. She slowly stood up on trembling legs. I will be there for you. All of you." She sucked in a breath. "Could you do me one teensy tiny favor first?" Pinkie Pie bounced around her. "Sure thing, Flutters. Whatever you need, we'll get done for you. Faster than light." Fluttershy suddenly grabbed Pinkie's with her forelegs and shook her, rattling her head back and forth. "Tuck me out of it!" Pinkie's head snapped forward, eyes rolling her head. "I'll take you up on that after we free Megan and stop that terrible T-Rex from trampling all over Equestria, okay?" Fluttershy let out a breath and dropped to her hoofs. "Oh, well, all right," she said, kicking at the grass. Celestia floated the elements of loyalty and kindness to their respecting orders. "And now it's time." She looked up at a black swarm of shadow balls gathering. "Even with Princess Sparkle's help, I still don't have my full strength back, and I fear we'll need everything we've got for the Everfree. Princess Ponies, Bushwoolies, do what you can, but don't be martyrs." Sparkle trotted up to Celestia Luna. "We'll leave ourselves a way out, Celestia, but do not worry too much. This isn't our first time in combat," she said, winking. "I'll tell you about the time we got in trouble with the Weather Witch." Luna rolled her eyes. "We've heard that one before, Sparkle." She suddenly bent her head down and nuzzled the unicorn. "But take care of yourselves anyway." Sparkle returned to nuzzle, then walked back to the other princess ponies. She floated her wand into the air and glowed brightly. The other four raised their heads, wands clenched in their teeth, dazzling bright. Luna and Celestia's horns glowed, and their eyes turned bright white. Their regalia deformed and floated across their bodies, changing into armor that covered them from muzzle to dock, even along their wings. Luna's was midnight black, with a subtle center and tiny printbacks of light dusting it. Celestia's was golden, blinding the enemies, but somehow only glowed for friends and family. The armor along her back, loin, and hips expanded, forming into a saddle and stirrups. Their swords, Nadir and Zenith, at their sides. Mike stepped to Celestia and sketched a bow. Well, thank you, he said, and sorry for blowing up like I did earlier. He looked at the Everfree. God man, this is pretty damn scary for me. Celestia leaned in close. I don't think it would become as a big surprise to you that I'm scared too. But with all of us together, I know we can prevail. She knelt down. Now, if you please, the Shining Knight needs an appropriate steed after all, she said, winking. Mike stifled a laugh. He grabbed onto the saddle's pommel and, with a bit of discreet assistance for Celestia, swung his leg over and hoisted himself up. He held up Megan's rifle and thrust it in the air. Let's go! He shouted. Celestia reared back and kicked the air. She dropped down to all fours and galloped ahead, Luna right by her side. Twilight and the other bearers of the Elements of Harmony formed into a tight group behind the alicorns. Fluttershy in the middle, dashed in the air. Luna and Celestia's horns shot out, carving a path not only through the foliage of the Everfree, but the shadow bolts as well. Mike held the rifle raised and was firing off bolts of heresy from it, reducing any shadow bolt he aimed at into clouds of ash. The princess ponies and bush woolies watched him as he charged off. Primrose let a sigh. May the herd guide you, she said, round the wand in her mouth. Shadow bolts suddenly emerged from the forest and from above the canopy. Royal Blue swallowed back up slightly. Perhaps the herd can help us out a little? Tiffany floated in the air, staring out at the shadow bolts opposite of her. She raised a foreleg and waved it at herself. The shadow bolts all snarled and flew right at her. Tiffany waited a moment before swinging her head back and forth, the tip of her wing flaring to life. A beam shot out from it, carving a deep gash in the fabric of space itself, and opening up a rift to somewhere else. The shadow bolts all gasped, flared their wings and threw their forelegs out in front of them, but the first wave flew right into the gas. It sealed up, leaving nothing but empty sky for the moment. Royal Blue and Serena slammed their wands into the ground. Bolts of electricity shot from them, racing along the ground. They struck various shadow bolts, flowing up their bodies and electrocuting them. Their skin flashed translucent in places, showing their skeletons. Their bodies jerked and spasmed before they dropped to the ground, smoke curling from their bodies. Sparkle, Starburst, and Primrose, meanwhile, waved their wands in the air. High winds picked up, howling through the air. They slammed into the shadow bolts on the ground and in the air, tossed them about, sending them flying back. They crashed to the ground, each other, trees, and rocks. More often than not, they laid where they landed, letting out moans of pain, if still alive. The blob of Wisp boys simply rolled away over any shadow bolt they encountered. More shadow bolts poured into the Everfree, gobbling over those already dead or dying. The princess ponies continued their assault, slowly backing up the path that led to Ponyville. Tiffany continued slicing the sky open, but the Pegasi came in greater numbers and faster waves. I don't think I can keep this up! She shouted, floating down to her fellow ponies. Sparkle lowered her wand and looked it over. They're almost out of the power they drew from the heart, she said. She reached out and telekinetically brought Tiffany close to her and the others. Hang on, she shouted, her horn glowing. We're going for a ride! Primrose's head surged back as she stared wide-eyed at Sparkle. What? Are you crazy? You're still out of practice! Royal blew down a hoof at the bush woolies as they continued to roll along. And what about them? The multicolored blonde rolled along, up and over shadow bolts without slowing, slashing and burying them with swords of steel. We'll be fine! They called out, steering to the Everfree. Gotta save Megan! Yeah, save Megan! Stop doing that! Yeah, stop doing that! Save Megan! They'll be alright, Sparkle said. But will we be? Royal Blue countered. The unicorn rolled her eyes and horn flashed, the magic enveloping all 6 of them. When the light faded, they were gone. Over 200 shadow bolts continued to Ponyville, not knowing what happened to their former targets, and not caring. The Friendship Express pulled into an empty Ponyville station. A pair of engineers stood on the platform as the train slowed down and stopped. The car doors opened, and the Royal Guard poured out, armor and weapons clattering. Shining Armor and Flash Statue walked up to him. What are you two still doing here? Shining Armor asked. I thought everyone was being evacuated. One of the engineers, an Earth pony named Iron Engine, spoke up. Someone had to make sure that the station was all right until you pulled in, she said. Her companion, a rather muscular unicorn named Punch Ticket, continued. And we had to make sure the tracks were all set on this end, too. He sat the foreleg and tried to switch. Couldn't just leave it until T-Rex forces didn't send your train out the rails. Shining Armor near to him, nodded to him. Thanks, but we're here, so get going! We'll take it here. He marched forward as the guards' ponies gathered together. A spear sheer floated over to him. Alright, you fools, listen up! This is it! This is where we hold the line! For Equestria, for the Royal Guard! He thrust his spear to the air. Remember your training! Remember the months and years of rebuilding! Of showing that we are worthy of those uniforms! Of the legacy of the Guard! Together, we will drive T-Rex forces back! He marched off the platform and pointed the spear tip in the general direction of the Everfree forest. Now, forward march! The ponies all fell into formation and tried or flew after him. Flash Sentry flew over and landed next to Shining Armor. Nice speech, he said. We are going to do it. Buzzing thus, Captain. Shining Armor kept his face forward, his fresh and neutral. I hope you're right, Flash. But for whatever comes, I'm glad you're here. A chuckle escaped to Pegasus. Aw, didn't know you cared. What happens if Cadus hears you? Shining Armor's mask broke and he half smiled. His horn glowed, and a very faint shield surrounded him in Flash Sentry. As much as it pains me to say, you're my right host stallion here. They trade their haunches off, but most of them haven't seen combat. Flash Sentry nodded, the smile gone. Talk about trial by fire. This won't be easy. The smile returned. But we'll get through. We'll all get through it. Shining chuckled how escaped Shining Armor. Since when did you become a motivational speaker? Well, there was this Minotaur doing a self-help seminar. That's right. Our will helps out many people, even those in the Royal Guard. Ponyville was quiet, eerily so. Danny, Molly, and Minerva moved down Main Street. The only sounds were their movements. They let out a slow whistle. Shh. Looks like everyone's inside. He jabbed a thumb up at the building. I think we better get some cover. Minerva's eyes started back and forth. Okay, where the hell did everyone go? Do they have an evacuation plan for this sort of thing? Molly looked around. Considering what we see in Ponyville, and what I've heard that could come out of that damned forest, I'd be surprised if they didn't. She pointed to Town Hall. Let's look inside there for the moment and find out what's going on. The three turned and started to make their way there, but a sudden ball of white light appeared in their path. It quickly disappeared, leaving behind the princess ponies. Oh, my aching horn, Sparkle mumbled, kneading the forehead with her hoof. Molly dropped down to her knees, steady and wobbling Royal Blue. What are you doing here? And where's the Bushwillies? Danny asked, rolling up. Royal Blue's eyes crossed and uncrossed themselves. They rolled out into the Everfree before we could get to them, she said. We took as many as we could, but there were too many of them, and our wands began to lose their magic reserve. We were about to be overrun by the Shadow Bolts, so Sparkle teleported us out of here, leaving our stomachs behind in the process. Minerva tilted her head to the side and cupped her free hand around her ear. Do you hear that? She asked. Everyone heard a faint rumbling sound in the distance. Manny and Molly readied their forearms, while Minerva readied her laser pistol. About how far is it from the Ponyville to the Rainbow Bridge? Shadow bolts suddenly appeared in the distance, on the ground and in the air. They stopped at the edge of the small forest between Ponyville and Everfree, and galloped down a hill while Pegasi flew over, looming in low. Minerva's eyes widened behind her glasses. Tom! She walked forward, raising her laser pistol. The inner face of the lenses lit up as she squished the trigger. Blues shot from the emitter, each one striking a shadow bolt in a final spot. They tumbled to the ground, ignored by the others and trampled over. Molly walked up to Minerva's side. She raised one of her own pistols, aimed, and fired. Several shadow bolts jerked and fell to the ground. Mostly were merely wounded, however. Molly grit her teeth as she fired the final bullet from the chamber, holstered it out, and pulled out the other one. She took a step back as she continued firing. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work! Day rolled over to his sister's side, faced an oppressive mask. He held his shotgun up and aimed at the shadow bolts as they continued charging toward Ponyville. He held his breath and fired, body rocking from the recoil. He pulled back on the pump handle, ejecting the spent shell and ignoring the mild ache in his arms. He continued firing into the massive shadow bolts, aiming for the largest groups, with the final shell in the tube magazine. He fired the shotgun over and began reloading it, willing his fingers to stop shaking. Minerva glanced over her shoulder at the princess ponies, still firing and hitting shadow bolts. And Elon Musk left in those ones of yours. Sparkle shook her head. Not enough to do any good, I'm afraid. She closed her eyes and scrunched her face up in concentration. The tip of her horn began to glow. If you give me a moment, I can teleport us out all here. Molly's second post still clicked empty. She swore and pulled out 2 magazines from her jacket pockets. Following about, she ejected the empty ones and reloaded. Psst! Sparkle! I'm staying until the end. She brought her both pistols up and started firing into shadow bolts, yelling at the top of her lungs. Danny rolled his eyes. Wait a waste shot, Silas! He brought his own Remington up as the shadow bolts entered Ponyville proper and barreled down the street at him. But way to go! Minerva's hands twitched as she directed the lasers at the ever-encroaching enemy. I don't have anything pithy to say, she submitted, but I'll be damned if I'm running now! Sparkle looked to her fellow princess ponies. They all nodded to her. Then we stay too, she announced, raising her wand. Suddenly, a red steamroller named Big Macintosh burst from the alley, tackling shadow bolts and tossing them into each other. He brought up an armored hoof, smashing it into the muscles and breaking jaws. Cheeks and skulls were sickening crunches. What is with the Apple family and these fanfics and having really cool big dang hero moments? He grabbed one by the head and twisted, breaking the neck with one mighty turn. He grabbed another and spun it out, barreling it to the closest and clearing out a small space. He reached down, pulled out an explosive from his bandolier strap, and tossed it in a general direction of the shadow bolts, arming it with his teeth. It landed, almost unnoticed until it exploded 3 seconds later, sending out a shower of shrapnel that made and killed those closest. Shadow bolts concentrated on him, swarming over. Big Mac's tail swayed about, sending a 10-pound flail about, crushing bone and flesh underneath it. He turned to see one shadow bolt, but it suddenly jerked and fell back. A clean hole burned through his skull by a laser bolt. Minerva lowered her laser slightly, looked at Manny and Molly and Danny as they raised their own weapons. Wait, she said, no offense, but I've got somewhat better aim. I'll support Big Mac, and you two keep picking off the others. And with that, she started firing again, slowly walking forward. Shadow bolts around Big Mac began dropping, dead or heavily wounded. Then all hell broke loose. And if you're not playing something like Ballroom Blitz or some other awesome song by, say, Iron Fire or maybe Metallica or Dreamtale, then please do so. I have a list. Just ask me, and I will give you a list because this is rocking. A dozen doors were thrown open, and the citizens of Ponyville ran out past Danny, Molly, Minerva, and the Princess Ponies, holding improvised weapons and galloping right past the Shadow Bolts. Caramel and Blues lowered their helmeted heads and tackled the ones closest, while the Flower Trio wielded cast iron pans in their mouths and blindly swung at them with all their might. Iron Butterfly. All I'm thinking of right now is Inagata Devita, thank you. Lashed out with hooves and tail, rendering his opponents unconscious with precise, measured blows. Mare followed along, ducking and striking where they least expected it. Liar's Liar played, lulling her enemies into a stupor and sending them up for bonbon to him over the head with a rolling pin. Lois and Aloe worked as one, working down their opponents with grace and definitely pressure strikes. Dr. Hooves and Sparkler used sonic instruments and Venusi and Akito, trying to kill, not to kill, but incapacitate. Carrot Top proceeded to use a freaking carrot sword against some of them, while Raindrops proceeded to show off what she could do with her own host style. Cheerly, of course, was being awesome and, well, just kicking some Major League Booty with several improvised moves he learned on the streets. And Trixie, you're just awesome. Thank you. The Shadow Bolts reared, turning and running back, but smoke bombs suddenly appeared from behind them. Spectral images of Nightmare Moon, Discord, the Smooths, and other Eldritch beings appeared, looming larger than life. For the smoke, Sakura emerged. Staff balanced over her shoulder. She struck the ground with it, and fireworks exploded right in front of them, driving them into each other in blind panic and confusion. Danny opened his mouth, but a faint rumbling from behind caught his attention. He looked back to the Royal Guard, led by Shining Armor and Flash Sentry, came barreling flying up across the street. They floated around and flew overhead, passing by them and throwing themselves into the fight. Spears, swords, and guns cutting through the Shadow Bolts. Flash Sentry flew to their side and landed, and saluted. Lieutenant Flash Sentry, he said, saluting. Sorry we couldn't get here sooner. He looked at the boughs and began turning into a route. Although I'm not sure how much we really needed. Danny clumsily returned to salute. Well, take it, he said. Thanks! Ahead, Shining Armor's horn flared, and a shield formed ahead of him. He turned into an inverse of its usual shape, using it to scoop away shadow bolts as he ran for Big Mac. Sharks an apple! He yelled as he cleared a path to him. Big Mac kicked at the ribs of the shadow bolt and looked at Shining Armor. Captain, he drawled out, not enough work. He said as several shadow bolts managed to surround him once more. Thanks, he replied. He looked over at their foes and furrowed his eyebrows. Looks like we're cut off and there's a building behind us, he said. Big Mac nodded as he thrust his flail back and forth. Yup. It might be a few minutes before we get help, too, Shining Armor continued. I say it's what, 12 to 1 right now? Big Mac lowered his head and pawed the ground. Looks like it to me, Captain Armor. A sign, isn't it? Shining Armor's horn lit up. Yeah, it's just not fair. They never did have a chance. Nope.